The debate over short-term rentals in Boston is coming to a head, just days after the International Conference of Mayors came to town, whose chief sponsor was, ironically, Airbnb. The City Council is expected to vote tomorrow on new regulations that would severely limit short-term rentals around the city. Regulations put forward by Mayor Marty Walsh last month would ban properties operated by investors from being used as rentals and require registration with the city, plus annual fees. Backers say the new rules would put an estimated 2,000 apartments back on the market and ease some of the housing crunch across the city, but others argue it's not so simple. Joining me now are Boston City Councilor Michelle Wu, who's been a key player for housing advocates in these discussions, and Kama Cicero, a real estate broker and founding member of the Boston Host Alliance, who runs the short-term rental company STARS. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Councilor, let me start with you. If this proposal passes, who is going to be able to play the short-term rental game in the city, and how long are they going to be able to play it?
Sure. If the language as written right now passes, or the language that came out of the committee report passes, we will essentially be limiting short-term rentals to owner-occupants, with a small exception for those who are owner-occupants of a 2- or 3-family home, and they could put one additional unit on the short-term rentals market.
Okay, so if someone is living in a triple-decker, they can put one unit in that triple-decker on the market?
In addition to the one they live in, so they can do an extra one.
And they can rent for up to a year, correct?
Yep.
365 days every year, as long as they fit into one of those categories? Yep. All right, and there are 3 different types. I don't want to get too in the weeds, but I think this stuff is important. 3 different types of residences that could be rented out, right? Limited share units, home share units, and owner-adjacent units. Can you just explain what those are?
Yeah, we're basically just talking about, let's say you live in a triple-decker. You live on the first floor. You can do the extra bedrooms in your own apartment on the first floor. That's what's called the limited share unit, and there's no restriction on that. You can do your whole unit. Let's say if you go on vacation or you're away on a trip for the summer or something like that, that is the home share unit. And then the other exception is, again, only for owners of 2- and 3-family homes who live in that home. You can do an extra unit, one of your other 2.
Got it. Okay, Kama, I'm going to turn to you. First, I should mention we did ask Airbnb to come on. They told us they weren't able to participate. We have a statement from them that we'll read later. Before I get your take on the specifics of the city proposal, your short-term rental company, STARS, what is that?
STARS is an acronym for Short-Term Apartment Rental Solutions.
So what do you guys do that, say, Airbnb does not?
So we are a small company, founded, it'll be 3 years in July, and we have short-term properties ranging from rooms to 3 bedrooms, mostly in the greater Boston area, Brookline, Brighton.
Okay, so you're akin to Airbnb, but just on a much smaller scale.
Correct,
okay.
Yes.
So from your vantage point, running the sort of business that you do, what's wrong with the proposal that Councilor Wu and her colleagues have hashed out?
So if the regulations pass, it will put myself and all the other members of the Boston Host Alliance out of business.
Why?
Because we are, I think the problem is we've been classified as the investor unit, and we're not. We're the middle guy that's getting stuck between the homeowner and the investor.
Explain that a little more to me. Who owns the properties that you help people rent out?
So for my company, there's several different landlords that own. They've owned for many, many years. I'm a real estate agent in Boston, and the rental market for the past 4 years has been a strong rental market, but every year in July, the market just shuts down. And I think it's because we have a surplus of 21,000 new units in the Boston area, and it's hard for a brownstone to compete with a high-rise luxury building. So in September, the season is June through September. The past 3 years, we've had so many apartments that weren't renting. So these places were vacant, and landlords came to us and asked if we could help them. So we furnished, and that's how we started renting short-term. All
right, Councilor Wu, you have a chance to sell a critic on the wisdom of the regulations. Is there something she's missing? Obviously, you're running a business. You don't want to be put out of business.
Correct.
You claim that would happen. Is that a risk for people like Kama? And if so, what's the argument in proceeding anyway?
Yeah, we had a chance to talk a little bit before the show, so I got a sense of Kama's business and how hard she works doing it and all the people that she's employing. So we know that this set of regulations will have an impact in people being able to make less money in some cases and not being able to pursue certain business opportunities. It's a question of, I think, the risks that folks have taken when they choose to have not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, taken on de facto, basically hotel-like use in a place that is zoned as residential. And we don't allow a lot of business uses in resident. You can't just open a dog grooming shop or a recycling plant right out of your house. So there are certain rules in place, and this is meant to preserve as much of our housing stock as possible, which we both agreed is very precious, but also do it in a way that's fair and consistent across the board.
I want to get to the statement that we did get from Airbnb, which I think we're going to put on the screen right now. Let me just read it quickly. We're disappointed the proposed ordinance includes unworkable provisions limiting the ability of tenant and low-income Bostonians to benefit from home sharing in one of the country's most expensive markets. There's a way to balance protecting affordable housing and keeping neighborhoods safe while also supporting the economic opportunities created by home sharing. So a little bit of a difference there for you, Councilor Michelle Wu. Originally, they went after you in April for siding with big hotels, as they put it, or big hotel interests. Now they're saying that you and your colleagues, not naming you in particular, are limiting the ability of lower-income people to rent out their properties unfairly. What is the story behind that restriction in the ordinance that you're going to be voting on, I guess, tomorrow, saying that people in income-restricted units or people who are getting some sort of rental assistance from the state or local or federal government can't work with Airbnb or a service like hers?
Yeah, we had a case situation a couple of months ago that came out where someone in Boston Housing, subsidized housing owned and operated by the Boston Housing Authority, was renting out the unit in South Boston. And in that case, we know how hard people are struggling to make ends meet, but subsidized housing is for those who need it. And if your family needs 2 bedrooms, we want you to have 2 bedrooms. We don't want you to have 3 bedrooms and then make a little money on the side, because there is a family that needs all 3 of those bedrooms that's on a very long wait list. So that's the reason behind the subsidized housing restriction, exclusion. And then in terms of renters, this was really about starting from a place where we're sure about the enforcement, but also where we are keeping as much of the rental housing stock protected as possible. And when renters are part of the situation, when renters are able to do Airbnb, we've seen now there is a little bit of a loophole when people can sign 5 leases, 4 of them are for Airbnb, 1's actually for themselves, or when a landlord knows they can charge more rent because they only need 1 real tenant, and then they'll just ask that tenant to get Airbnb for the other bedrooms in there.
Kama, let me ask you, I saw you, I think, maybe nodding your head in agreement at least a little bit of what Councilor Wu was saying. If you had a chance to pitch her and her colleagues on the council, and you may be doing this tonight for all I know through the Boston Host Lines, if you had a chance to suggest 1 or 2 tweaks to what they're going to be voting on tomorrow, what would you suggest they shift slightly?
Well, it would be more than 1 or 2 tweaks.
Okay,
but,
give me your top 1 or 2.
I mean, I guess, where we are at this point in time, to at least grant, the Boston Host Alliance and other people such as myself, a grace period. We're calling it the sunset period, to at least finish out the existing leases that are pending right now, because I'm not sure when everything would take effect. But if if you vote on it and it takes effect next month, people have signed lease agreements that will be held to. And
let's, since that's your top question, your top priority, let's get an answer from the councilor. How quickly would these provisions take effect?
So the language in the ordinance says January 1st, 2019. And I've been talking with some folks. So there is the opportunity to entertain amendments from the floor from any councilor that wishes to add or change some of the language. We have heard from folks that having a sort of wind down or sunset period does make a difference for businesses that are going out of business. So happy to talk more on that.
Yeah, because that's, the dead of winter, and we're talking about holidays. And, the Boston Host Alliance employs 120 people, just us, and we're a small portion.
You're a co-founder of that group, right?
Exactly. So all of the cleaners, the contractors, the administrative people aren't going to have a job. Right. And then we're going to have vacant apartments in the dead of winter, and it's just going to cause, a trickle-down effect.
With that, we got to move on. Kama Cicero, Boston City Councilor Michelle Wu. Thank you both.
Thank you so much.